Greetings, class, and welcome back. This is the Foundational 15 for Chapter 5. And in this video, I'm going to walk through these 15 computations that are here. We have in this document a description of Oslo Company doing a contribution format income statement based on sales volume of 1,000 units. They had sales of 20,000, variable expense of 12, a contribution margin of 8, a fixed expense of 6, and net income of 2,000. So the question is, we have these 15 items we need to compute. We want to look at those. First of all, your responses that you record will be included in this Excel spreadsheet that's been loaded into the course. Basically, you will type your responses in these cells, and the gray area is for the numbers. In my approach here, I'm going to take a look at this sheet, and then I'm going to actually compute these out in sort of a freehand way. And you can look at this video and then go back and do the spreadsheet. The first question is, what is the contribution margin per unit? Well, in the problem, they tell us we have an $8,000 contribution margin, and we sold 1,000 units. So basically, you're just dividing 8,000 by 1,000 units to get $8 per unit. A fairly straightforward calculation. Okay. For number 2, they ask you, what is the contribution margin ratio? Well, with that, we're looking at the contribution margin, which was $8,000. If we go back to the document, you can see it right here, 8,000 and sales of 20. So I'm going to go back here and divide that $8,000 contribution margin by $20,000 to get a 40% contribution margin ratio. Okay, number 3 is what is the variable expense ratio? Well, the variable expense is 12,000. So what we want to do with that is say 12,000 divided by 20,000. That'll give us a 60% variable expense ratio. Now keep in mind that these two ratios are complementary. That is, once you figure one, you can just subtract from 100% and get the other. All right? Okay, let's take a look at number 4 here. Number 4 says, if sales increase to 1,001 units, what would be the increase in net operating income? Well, one of the things that we can know is that if we're beyond the break-even point, and we are, every additional unit that we sell will increase net income by the contribution margin per unit. So we have an $8 per contribution, or contribution margin per unit. We just multiply that times the number of units sold to get the amount that's added to an increase in net income. So if we're beyond the break-even point, that's what will happen. Okay. So for number 5, we go back here and look, and it says, if sales decline to 900 units, what would be the net operating income? Well, so we want to change our calculation. We're going to use the actual contribution margin income statement format. So we're going to say, what happens? Well, we have sales of 900 units at $20. That's going to be $18,000 instead of $20,000. We'll have variable expense, 900 units at $12. That does not change. That's what was there before. So now we have $10,800 in variable expense. So our contribution margin on this will be $7,200. Then we're going to have fixed expense, which will be $6,000. So the answer to our question is that the net income will now be $1,200 for 900 units sold. All right? Okay. So that's number 5. Let's take a look at number 6. Okay, let's go back. For number 6, it says if the selling price increases by $2 a unit and the sales volume decreases by 100 units, what would be the net income? So we're looking at a similar situation. So we're going to have sales of 900 units times or at $22 each. That will give us a sales of 19,800. Okay. Variable expense will still remain at $12, so we have 900 at 12. That gives us 10,800. So now we have a contribution margin of 9,000. All right, then we subtract out the fixed expense of 6,000, and we have net income of 3,000. Okay. All right, so that's number 6. So we just basically recomputed that using the contribution margin approach. For number 7, let's go back here. It says if the variable cost per unit increased by $1, spending on advertising increased by $1,500, and sales increased by 250 units, what would be the net income? Well, we're going to go back to the assumption that now we're selling these at $200 a piece. So for number 7, we're going to have sales of 1,250 units at $20. That's 25,000. Okay. Then the variable expense, now instead of $12 a unit, we're going to have $13 a unit. So we say 1,250 at 13, and that's going to give us 16,250 as our variable expense, and a contribution margin of 8,750. Okay, then we deduct the fixed expenses, and remember they said we added $1,500 in advertising to the previous fixed expense of 6,000, so we have 7,500. That means the net income is 1,250. Okay, now we need to take a look at what we have in number 8. Alright, go over here to number 8, and it says what is the break-even point in unit sales, and number 9, what is the break-even point in unit dollars. So for this one, they want us to use the formula approach. So if we say profit is equal to unit contribution margin times quantity minus fixed expense, that is the formula we want to use. So the profit here is 0 because we're looking for break even. The unit contribution margin is going to be $20 minus 12 because that's the sales price minus the variable expense times the quantity. We still don't know what that is. and minus fixed expense is 6,000. Okay, so now again, $0 is equal to $8 times Q minus 6,000. So we add this 6,000 to both sides. We get 6,000 is equal to 8Q. And so we divide both sides by 8. 6,000 divided by 8 equals Q. Q is equal to 750 units. Okay, that's number 8. Now we go to number 9, and we're looking at something kind of similar, but we're going to look at it, instead of looking at it through units, we're going to look at it through dollar sales. So we're going to say profit is equal to the contribution margin ratio times sales minus fixed costs. All right. So when we have the profit set at 0, the contribution margin ratio is going to be 8,000 divided by 20,000. Remember? Times sales. We don't know what sales is. We'll find out. Minus fixed cost of 6,000. All right, so the $0 is equal to 40% times sales minus 6,000. We're going to take 6,000 on both sides and add it. We have 6,000 is equal to 40% times sales. We get 6,000 then divided by 40%, because we're dividing both sides by 40%, equals sales. When we do that math, we get $15,000 is equal to sales. Okay? So basically, we're just taking a formula and mathematically solving that, working down through the formula. Okay, with number 10, we're going to go back and take a look at that. And it says how many units will be must be sold to achieve a target profit of 5,000. All right, so when we look at that, we're going to use the same formula where we said, profit, where the profit here now is $5,000. That's equal to the unit contribution margin times quantity minus fixed. So we're going to have 5,000, not 5,100, 5,000. Is equal to the unit contribution margin of $20 minus 12 times Q minus 6,000. All right. When we go through this, we have an $8 contribution margin per unit times Q minus 6,000. That's equal to 5,000. We move the 6,000 to this side. We're going to add 6,000 to both sides, so we have 11,000 here is equal to $8 times Q, $8. We're going to divide 11,000 by $8 to get the quantity that we want to produce to have this target profit. And so our quantity then will be 1,375 units. All right. Okay. Now we need to look at number 11. All right, with number 11, they're asking us to calculate the margin of safety. Now, margin of safety is something we didn't really discuss too much in class. But if you look at it here, they say, okay, what is the margin of safety in dollars and in percentage? Basically, the margin of safety is the difference between the break-even point and net income. So if we're using, so we have the margin of safety computed this way. We're selling at the $20,000 level. Okay, this is back to the original. We're selling 1,000 units at $20. So sales are $20,000. The break-even point in dollar, well, we had break-even point was 750 units at $20, so that's going to be $15,000. So the margin of safety here is $5,000, okay? Now, expressed as a percentage, we're just going to take the margin of safety of 5,000 divide by sales of 20,000. We get 25%. So that's the margin of safety and as a percentage, okay? Okay, for number 12, they ask for the degree of operating leverage. And degree of operating leverage is going to be so we have degree of operating leverage. That's going to be the contribution margin of 8,000 divided by net income of 2,000 to give us a 4.0 degree of operating leverage. What that means is, when we look at number 13, they're saying, okay, a 5% increase in sales, what kind of, for number 13, using the degree of operating leverage, what's the estimated percent increase in net income from a 5% increase in sales? Well, basically, you take the degree of operating leverage, (4.0) times the percent increase in sales of 5%. That means you'll have a 20% increase in net income. Okay? All right. So that gives you the increase in net income using the degree of operating leverage. Okay, now we're working on number 14, and we're going to go over here and take a look at number 14 in the document. It says, assume that the amounts of the company's total variable expenses and fixed expenses were reversed. In other words, assume that the total variable expenses are 6,000 and the total fixed expenses are 12. Under this scenario, and assuming the total sales remain the same, what's the degree of operating leverage? Well, let's do the contribution margin income statement. So we have sales. Let me redo that. Sales of 20,000. And then we're going to have variable expenses. Now remember, they just said they were reversed, so the variable expense, instead of being $12,000, is now $6,000. So we have a contribution margin of $14,000. Okay, our fixed expense will be $12,000. That means our net income will remain the same at $2,000. Okay? But now what changes is the actual degree of operating leverage, because we're going to take the contribution margin, of $14,000 and divide it by net operating income, $2,000. That gives us a degree of operating leverage of 7.0. Now what this shows you really is the impact of changes in the contribution margin, right, in relationship to the net income. Like I said before, once you pass this break-even point, every additional item you sell gives you a contribution margin per unit added to the net income, because you've already covered all the fixed expenses. So for number 15, and this is the last one on the list, they ask us, using the degree of operating leverage you just computed in the previous question, what is the estimated percent increase in net operating income of a 5% increase in sales? Let's go back and do that. So we have degree of operating leverage of 7.0 we have a percent increase in sales of 5%. So we're multiplying these, and we get then an increase in net income of 35%. All right, compare that to what we calculated up above here when we said 20%. You can see the big difference that happens when you flip around the numbers and you have a much larger contribution margin. This is the result. The difference is the result of the larger contribution margin. And because you've already covered all the fixed expenses, then you're going to have a much bigger impact on net income. So that's the Foundational 15 for Chapter 5. I hope you find this helpful.